Are you ready, Keith?
So we are now recording, and just to give you a few minutes to settle yourselves, can I say welcome to everybody who's on the call. Thank you so much for joining us. Welcome to anybody who's watching the recording, and most of all, a big welcome and thank you to you, Keith, Dr. Keith Blevens, who you have been, I think, a mentor and teacher to both Barbara and I. And if it wasn't for your work and what we've learned from you, then we would not have got together, because I think we identified each other. We only met online initially and identified each other as very impressed and influenced by your work on the three principles paradigm. So it has been really transformative. I mean, I came across it a few years after I'd already stumbled across the principles, and I can say it was as much of a transformation as having first come across the principles was. So it's been really, really profound for me, and I'm delighted to have met you in person on a number of occasions and attended a number of in-person trainings as well as many online trainings. So one of the outcomes of your work is that Barbara and I got together and wrote our book about addiction, and we've decided, it having been stalled in its publication because of the pandemic and lockdown, we've decided to sort of almost relaunch it and invite some of our most cherished teachers and friends in this work to kind of talk to different aspects of it. And Barbara, I'm going to hand it over to you, and I'm also going, I don't know if you have to hand the actual title of I've just realized I don't have it in front of me, the title of today's show, but I'm really looking forward to what you've got to say. And just one final thing, which you may speak to or not, but I've been in recovery for many, many years, but this work hugely shifted my experience of that. And there's one thing that I heard you say, Keith, which is that it's not, people indulge in addictions because they believe they have a need, but it's not, but they don't have a real need, they just think they have a need. And even though I'd been in something like that, and even though I've been in recovery for so many years, that was incredibly helpful to me, just that distinction of the false needs that can be innocently and unwittingly created in thought and make life very unmanageable until we see through it. So I want to thank you for that too.
Really?
And before we turn to you, Keith, I'm just going to let and invite Barbara just to say a few words, if that's okay.
Well, Keith, again, thank you. We're just thrilled, and especially I'll just let the people on this call and anyone who watches that on a recording, he's so gracious to do this, especially since we spelled his name wrong in the book.
Did we?
So it's up for revision in a few years, and we will change that. But
I noticed that. Yeah, I thought, oh, that's very funny. Yeah.
Well, you were a good sport about it, but you did point it out to us pretty quick. So thank you for being willing to do this, even though we did spell it wrong. So that is not any indication of the respect and love we both have for you and for the simplicity of the single paradigm. When we wrote this book, when we started to tackle it, we were, when I was trained in the field of addictions, one of my mentors and teachers at that point was someone who wrote about the complexity of addiction. And he wrote these, massive charts and graphs and, diagrams, and that were just, that would just blow your mind in terms of all the psychosocial features of why, people, and all the biological. And so when we discovered this and we wanted to really tackle the field of addiction, both because Christian is in recovery and because I've worked in the field for so long, we just really wanted to stay very true to the simplicity and the brilliance, really, of the understanding that, our feelings only come from one source and one source alone. So that's my spiel, and now I'm gonna turn it over to you.
Oh my goodness. Well, thank you. Thank you both so much. So thank you for writing this book. Thank you for um, contributing to the welfare of humanity. I know it's probably a goal of many, or maybe all or most all of people who are helpers is wanting to, wanting to make a difference, wanting to really have something of substance and a value for people. And I was like you too, both of you, when I struck this, it was so mind-bogglingly, utterly simple that it, it began to rule out what I would call false causes of feelings, behavior, complexities, dynamics, things that everyone in the field of helping people had been immersed in, lost in, really, and this sort of struck down deep, right to the bottom of human experience, and then because it did, it it simplified our science, our efforts, our understanding, and really it ruled out so many things, so many. When you find a true cause of something, you find it eliminates all other possibilities, and something as utterly simple as this paradigm, these principles, um, rules out all those complexities that you mentioned, and all those dynamics, and all that the field, well, not only the field, but the whole science of mental life has been swirling around in unprincipled since the beginning. So when you find something of that simplicity and that that's such an elementary, you've really struck gold, and that's a real evolution in human understanding of ourselves, and of our nature, and our the logic of our nature, the logic of our behavior, the logic of our reality being exposed is a real shock, really. And it's a shock because all these other oceans of misdirection and confusion and blame and guilt and all this, all these false causes, false discriminators, false excuses, really fall away with that logic. And when I say logic, I don't mean the logic that's a body of doctrine or things to do or things that that it's the way it is. And when you find something of that at that level, you've really found a mind-boggling thing, especially as regards to human behavior, because human behavior has been such an enigma, such a puzzling thing without principles. And finding principles really is something that we've never had, in human behavior, human science, and addiction treatment, addiction understanding. That's why I love your title, one cause, one solution, because that's an utterly outrageous proposition, really. And I admire your courage in proposing that, because it's a real it's a limb that, that we've all stepped out on, and it takes some it takes some understanding to do that. Really, it takes some understanding. So the insights that you all have gained, and many others, and probably many people on this call, I presume, and myself, it's not a logic that has to do with anything other than the way it is. When you find something true about the way especially human behavior works, it really simplifies, makes it so utterly simple that you can't. It's inarguably simple, and immutably simple, and profoundly simple. And it kind of gives us a sort of fundamental kind of fallback, fundamental truth that's not a belief truth. It's a fact, and finding a fact about human behavior and addictions and all sorts of maladies of the human condition is really something that some of you may know, but William James was sort of the founder of, he was known as the father of American psychology, and Bill Wilson, who never met William James, but found an explanation, or found something in William James's work that Bill Wilson, of course, is the co-founder of AA. He considered James to be a co-founder of AA as well. And James did not know principles, and he said, I don't know what the principles are. The principles of psychology was the title of his first book. But someone who read it wrote him and said, where are the principles? Like, this is just called the principles. I couldn't find any principles in here. And he said, well, the fact is, psychology has no principles. Psychology is yet to find her first principles. And we really don't have anything. We just got a bunch of unrelated observations and facts and what have you, and we're at sea about the nature of mental life. The science of mental life is at sea, and so at sea meaning just lost. But he said, I wrote this book, The Principles of Psychology, trying to treat psychology as a science in the hope that it might become one. He's very honest about, it is no science, but it's hopeful. But he said at some point, and I love this phrase, come they someday surely will. He said, so this hope, he said, somebody, someday, not now, not yet, but someday, will find these principles. And when they do, and if they're understood on a large scale, it'll be a development more important than anything human beings have done technologically since fire. And I found that statement and his prognostication of whoever it might be that might find these principles, and lo and behold, it was Sydney Banks. Sydney Banks was the James called. He said, "Whoever that will be the Galileo of psychology." And and Sydney saw it so utterly simple that it ruled out all these thousands of theories and founded a psychology based on fact, not belief. And we're all the proud beneficiaries of that insight and that logic being exposed. And your book is an effect of that, a result of that. And your own understanding that wrote the book is that way too. And so I'm happy to call you all the fellow colleagues and discoverers of this fact and this truth and this simplicity that's revolutionizing our healthcare and our particularly our mental health care, or for mental science to have a fact is just utterly revolutionary. So I'm glad to be a part of this evolution. I think all of us have witnessed, either in our own life or the life of others, the amount of what I call suffering needlessly, and that all of this turmoil and confusion and misdirection and blame and guilt and then coping with the misery of that through behaviors and addictions and alcohol and drugs and thousands of other coping mechanisms, to find something of a final truth, of a first paradigm or of a first principles, and then share it with people is a real it's a real honor, isn't it? I feel that way, and I know you two feel that way, and I know many others feel that way, to give to the public and to articulate it as best we can, to point people back to this utter simplicity is just wonderful. And I love the idea of a paradigm, because a paradigm is a scientific term, but it honors a logic that when we find a logic that is explainable, it rules out all other illogics. And that's certainly a giant leap forward for human beings and their comprehension of what they're what they suffer from. There's so much suffering, psychologically, mentally, socially, spiritually, throughout the world that it's quite remarkable to find a simple logic to account for reality and the experience of people. So thank you. Thank you both for this this effort. Having I'm still working to write my first book, but tackling that adventure is, especially when you've got something so precious and something so simple, to not betray it by complication. I think you've done a really marvelous job to do so. So thank you.
Thank you. And I wondered, something you said there just inspired, it reminded me of something that happened last night, actually, with a friend in the in recovery. And she's on the fringes. I know her through recovery rather than the three principles, but I have introduced her to this, and she's kind of receptive and grasping little bits. And I just thought this was a real practical example of, she called me up, and she was in a tiz about something, about strong feelings she was having about someone, and she started to say, I think it's because I have sort of arrested development, that in my teens, I didn't really have a teenage experience because I was drinking, and and she was about to sort of go into this whole story, and I kind of have permission to say, oh, whoa, it's nothing to do with that. You just had a thought, and we can't help the thought, whatever thought that comes into our mind, but when it comes in, while we're entertaining it, it creates a feeling. And what you're doing now is adding more thoughts into that, more complexity, and that invites, then I've got to have a strategy to get over my lack of a teenage experience and so on. And it was just brilliant, because she was able to remember it was just a thought. It didn't matter. It was so what. And it was really interesting to see, she was about to dive right into the complexity and the burden of trying to undo this, and then just coming back to, no, it doesn't matter. The simplicity, the dissolving of the stories, and the dissolving of the mushrooming explanations. And it's astonishing. And she just, I mean, I had to end the call quite sharply. She said, oh, I just feel so much better. You've reminded me of that. And it's not, of course, it's not me. It's the fact that it's the truth.
Yeah, absolutely. And to stand on that and see through I think, I don't really know the definition of this term, so I shouldn't use it. The mishigash of all of that. Misunderstanding, really, and to have something that you could know and say, share, and it would land, like pierce through all of that misunderstanding, and which is obviously, as we all know, has been perpetuated by people like us, unwittingly, but just not having a principled psychologic to have that. And that you could say that, and she would hear it. It's like a voice in a storm or something, or so, like to penetrate through the, all the things, to have a fact that you could say to someone in distress, and have it penetrate. That's remarkable. And armed with that fact as a helper, wow, it's like having, I don't know, penicillin or something for an infection, you know. Oh, that's an infection in your eye. Oh, penicillin. Oh, the infection in your leg. Oh, penicillin. You know, or what, you know, having something that is that ubiquitous, that great. But this is way beyond that. But I mean, just to have something of certainty that you can share and have it be heard. So there's the sharing it and then hearing it, of course, and but it just works every time to affect change, and that's the change that every alcoholic is really looking for, and every drug addict, and every human being is really looking for. They're really searching in vain for an answer, you know, that will calm the storm, the self-created storm. I love that. We all value that, don't we?
One of the things, Keith, that for me in working with addiction over the years has been the real preponderance of victimization. You know, there's a wonderful saying in AA, pour me another drink. And, you know, when we feel victimized by life, you know, we're much more likely to seek some refuge or some relief from something, you know, from some substance or some habit that that temporarily numbs that or takes it away. And so there's something about the certainty of this that just grounds people. You know, it just doesn't work like that. Sorry, never did, never will. You know, it's just what you're feeling here is not what people have done to you or how terrible your childhood was. I once had a client who was a driver for a group of, for one of the halfway houses. So he would drive them back and forth from treatment to their halfway house. And when he learned this understanding, when he learned the single paradigm with me, he goes, wow, you know, I would sit there week after week and listen to everybody's victim story. It was never their fault. It was never their issue. It was the cop who arrested them. It was their mother. It was their ex-wife. It was whatever. And again, that just kept this illusion alive and made them, you know, have so little success in their recovery. So, you know, one of the reasons that Christian and I decided to do this book was because you don't see a lot of tremendous success in the traditional addiction field. You know, the psychiatrist I used to work with said they have about a 75%, you know, recidivism rate. Well, that's not very good odds. You know? Really. But when people have something solid, you know, firm, absolute, that they can hang their hat on and that they can challenge that thinking with, you know, no, yeah, I know it feels like my ex-wife, but no, it's really, this is really coming from me. It's not coming from her. It's so clarifying. I guess that's the great beauty of the simplicity of your diagram. It's just like, it doesn't work that way. This is the way it works. And just that alone, I think I've seen such tremendous turnaround with people who are willing to listen. I mean, victimhood, a lot of people like their victimhood, but for people who are ready to let go of that masochism, you know, this is just, it's just mind-boggling to see the growth that can happen so quickly.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And don't you find it in so many different symptom patterns, or, I mean, whatever it is, I can, I can empathize in a way with all this, what Sid calls the outside in, or contemporary psychology approach, because without principles, it's just um, uh, searching for causative agents. Why do I feel this way? Why am I in so much pain and misery? What's the matter with me? What's the matter with my past? What's the matter? What's the matter is just the endless searching question, and to know that's in the book I'm writing, and he said this elsewhere, but Sid said, "Never mind why," and to really let that soak in, to dismiss the illogic of minding why, removes victimhood. It just doesn't. It just eliminates the whole proposition of it, that it has some other cause, and you as a thinker dismissing the why is a real insight ready state of really of no thought, of no further explanation, and it hits you, and that getting hit by that, the truth of that is a real, it's so sobering, isn't it? So quieting. It's so quieting. It's so quieting because it just removes all the false explanations, false discriminators, and just stills the savage it stills the savage beast of your own lost mind, your own lost little mind. It makes that lost little mind, it reveals that lost little mind as an illusion. And that's one of the things I noticed whenever we put this onto a diagram, for example, and we would put different, I should have erased my thing, but you can see I have different feelings: apprehension, fear. For example, this is left over from a session I was doing, and by it's people would say, well, wait a minute, why do you put the same thing on both sides of this paradigm line? I said, well, that's because this is not the real problem. You have a paradigm problem. And so they kind of looked back inside, and they found that these feelings were not coming from anywhere other than their use of these principles. And that's no feelings have any other origin other than that. No experience, positive or negative. And they would get really quiet. And one lady said, no, don't tell me. She asked the same question. Well, her husband was grumpy. So I put grumpy husband. And then she said, you put the same thing on both sides. I said, yeah, exactly. Whoa. Oh, she said, don't tell me, don't tell me. She said, oh, it's not my upset with my husband is not coming from his grumpiness, is it? And so she got reflective, and there was that moment of insight where her little mind was open to the mystery rather than concluding she knew what the problem was. The arrogance of that misunderstanding was exposed to her, and she just she got reflective. And that's, of course, when, and I mean, haven't you noticed a quiet-mindedness that comes of this work, stillness. You don't have to figure it out, think about it, worry about it, be afraid of it. The quiet is really quite beautiful, really. And that's another word for peace, isn't it? Sid Banks said once, that's all you have to get is the illusion of your little mind. Really, that's it. You get that, you've synchronized your little mind with real mind, true mind, and it's in that synchronicity is peace every time. It's been quite a one time I saw the joke on myself that it took me 8 years of college to find out that all of that study into the dynamics and the inner workings of the little mind was the whole thing was just, you know, a wild goose chase, as my mom used to say. That was a wild goose chase. And maybe that's that it took 8 years of college to figure out that everyone was in a wild goose chase, because all of my professors were too, and all of my clients and myself. Everybody was on a wild goose chase. It was like the joke was on us, wasn't it? You know, like, I had one of my clients said once, says, "What do you call this stuff anyway?" You know, she was just like, "Wow." I said, "Well, we call it the 3 principles, or how it works, or you could call it anything you want." She says, "I think you should call it flathead therapy." And I said, which intrigued me, I said, "Flathead therapy?" She says, "Yeah." I keep going, "Duh." And she says, "If I keep going, duh, I'm going to get a dent in my forehead. Like I'm going to have, you know, it's going to have a dish there, because I'm so, it's so utterly simple that I just didn't really, that I'm amazed of the illusion that I've been lost in." Maybe we should title the next book. You guys could title it You're welcome to the title, Flathead Therapy.
Keith,
Oh, it wouldn't sell much.
Keith, are you open to some questions if there are any? I don't know if there
Oh,
are
yeah.
any, but we have quite a number of people on the call, and
Yeah, absolutely.
or any comments back.
Yeah, things to share or whatever.
Mhm.
Yeah, absolutely.
And then, having said that, knocked over by the silence.
Yeah, yeah.
Everyone's experiencing the peace that surpasseth understanding.
Yeah, yeah, right, yeah.
But if you do have any questions, folks, just please unmute yourself and come in. We'd love to hear from you.
Yeah.
Dr. Blevens, how do you impress on someone who is new to the whole game of recovery with that mindset ingrained in them that it's the ex-wife's fault, the dog's fault, society's fault, that this is truly an inside job, and that reaching for that alcohol or whatever their drug of choice is not the answer? I find it really difficult to break through that barrier with some people. How do you approach that with the principles?
Well, I think that's sort of the the kind of perennial question, but just knowing that there's an answer. I think it arms you with a lot of patience and a lot of wisdom, and because if somebody's lost and they're struggling, which of course they are, and their misdirection and their flourishes of misbehavior and misdirection and what have you are all there in them, and they're filing through it or thinking about it, but knowing it's sort of like the how of that is rather it's kind of obvious, but it has to be. You not only have an answer, but you want it to land. You want it to, because you knowing the answer isn't going to really help them, and so I think it's kind of like a timing issue or something. Like sometimes you could just say it, or try to say it. Sometimes they don't want to hear it, or they don't even understand what you're talking about. So they offer their objections or what have you. But the timing thing is just sort of being led, I think, by the truth of it, and you just listen for that. You listen for that as your kind of your calling, or your insight about and it might come like, could I say something here? Like you've been going. I'm playing with this a little bit, but I mean, have a person, she's so anxious and so at odds within herself about what her husband's doing and what people have told her, and she's so scared and she's so distraught that if I don't really jump in, she could just go on for hours, you know. So I just sort of interrupt, you know. But now she's really good natured about it, you know, and I just say what occurs to me, you know, to kind of quell the storm, you know. And I don't know when that timing occurs. It's just presents itself. It's like, how do you tell a good joke in a way? Like you remember there's something in the setup and then the delivery, but you learn that the first few times you tell a good joke and it doesn't really humor the person, you know, that you learn, oh, I didn't really set that up very well, or I misused the wrong word there, or I didn't realize that they weren't ready for, you know, something humorous to be said. So I sort of, I took permission that I didn't really have. I don't know how you do that. I just think you just sort of intuitively find, and I think what carries the message is your sincerity, your truth, your goodwill, you're wanting to speak to something that is you deem important, and sometimes that just means that you don't say anything, you know, too. I mean, you all know this, but I mean, it's just not the time yet, and then suddenly it is. How do you know when to enter in? I don't know. I don't know. I guess that's a long way of saying is I don't really know. I just know when I know to communicate something that I can't not say or do. You know, when you feel that kind of that opportunity, you know, to reach out and help, because sometimes people don't, I mean, you can see they don't really know what they're up against, you know, and they're flailing, you know, and you want to help, so you, but knowing knowing that moment, that's sort of like I don't know, like an art or something. I don't know. It's just listen, and you'll know. You'll know. You'll know how to make the difference that you have to offer. It'll come.
Yeah, thanks. That's what I guess I was kind of maybe looking to see if you had a shortcut answer. It's yeah, repeat, listen, and you can't, someone's not going to get sober until they're ready. Doesn't matter what you do. Thank you.
Well, I think it does matter what you do, in the sense that I think it does matter in that you 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 have a beautiful thing to offer. And sometimes, you know, I mean, oftentimes people just don't know. I mean, how could they possibly know that you've got the answer? They don't have the answer. They've looked for it everywhere. And to run into someone who's honestly got something, some real medicine, I mean, why would they possibly even imagine that that would be possible? So I don't think it's their readiness, but I mean, it may be your readiness, you know, your readiness to offer is guided by your own wisdom, and we can all attest to you never know what might land. What might land for a person who's really, you know, destitute, struggling. What might land for a person who doesn't think they need anything, and has no interest in any further. They've given up a long time ago, and so they're just willing to suffer, and quite proud of it. But as we've all seen, I mean, there is no there's no safe that can't be cracked. That doesn't have a combination. That's not really, because in the end, they're looking for the same thing that everybody else is looking for, and befriend them, and because you've got something that they really need, whether they really have any clue about it or not. Hey, I've got a front window here, and so my neighbors and friends walk by, and so somebody stopped to say hello or wave hello. But I don't know, like, how do you befriend the world? For me, watching Sid Banks operate was really interesting, because he would jump into places where there was no welcome mat out, you know, and he had no reservations, and he didn't care. Apparently, I don't know how to say it, but he didn't really. Back to what you said about if they're not ready, but it wouldn't mean that he wouldn't give it a shot, you know, because I saw him, you know, wade into a lion's den of skepticism and medicine and misdirection, you know, in great audiences of people like that, and he just said it anyway, you know. So I don't know where his guts came from. It must have, it had to come from just pure inspiration. But thank God he did, because we wouldn't be having this conversation even, you know, if somebody hadn't had the wherewithal to offer the truth to dumb audiences, where would we be? So it interested me that as I discovered working on this book, mostly written by him, that it was 10 months. So he had this enlightened truth exposed to him. And I always thought it was like a couple of days, I don't know, but it was 10, he says it was 10 months before anybody, including his own wife, heard what he was talking about. Well, you've got the answer to the mental health tragedies of human existence, and you're talking about it day and night and you would think with that kind of horsepower that he had, that it wouldn't take a day. It took 10 months, but he didn't quit talking. But I guess when you're back to that inspiration, I think when you've got something of that kind of caliber to offer, watch out, world, because you can't help yourself. And if you step on toes, then I don't know, apologize and step on them again. and I'm shy. I'm not an ordinarily. A lot of people have a lot more kind of, I don't know, guts or something. They just put it out there. And sometimes what they put out there isn't all that great, I've found. But to find the wherewithal within yourself to help another human being is it's a gift. You've been gifted. Share your gifts. That's what these two did that wrote this book here. They weren't any different than anybody else. And it takes time to write a book and hone it out. And it takes a lot of editing and rewriting and questioning and mustering up the courage. So thank you all for that. Inspiration. Thank God for that inspiration.
Keith, it was inspiration, but I also want to say one of the things that we did, because we were writing it in different continents. I was in Scotland and Barbara was in Massachusetts. But one of the things when we got together, sometimes there would be something we're saying, that's just not quite right. And we'd be bringing it back to the paradigm, the way that you and Valda have seen this and coined this was so helpful to us, to give us that, just that plumb line, that truth, that honesty to come back to. And I think that really enabled us to, it felt inspired when we were doing it, but it was, it enabled us to have that clarity.
Mm.
And I think as a result, we had, certainly as I recall it, Barbara, remarkably few fallings out because we had something a standard outside ourselves to, to come back to, and the impersonal truth of the principles and expressed as a paradigm.
Yeah, agreed. I like the plumb line. Really, the single paradigm was the plumb line for us. And we we really would wrestle with it. No, you know, like, what would Keith say? So it was really helpful, and the book was written in a really pretty record time, I think, in part because of the inspiration, which was really quite extraordinary, but I think especially because of the clarity of what you guys offered us. So we thank you very much for that.
Well, thank you. Thank you. It would mean nothing without people going, really? You know, like, you know, so thank you. But for me too, that there is a line, a plumb line is that's something of real magnificence. So you're welcome. So, and it's not mine, but there is a line, you know, it's not my line, it's everybody's line. And that's quite remarkable that's been found.
Yeah.
And we also find ourselves, sorry, if you were going to say something else, Keith.
No, I just say thank you again.
Well, a massive thank you to you and to everybody else. And we are at the top of the hour, so I'm wondering if that's an okay place to leave this call. And it's been wonderful for me, speaking for myself, and I'm so grateful for everything, Keith. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
And thank all of our folks listening.
Absolutely.
Thanks for joining us.